Here at FUTRtech, we love to talk about great new companies. We've also been talking a lot about security these days with major breaches regularly appearing in the headlines. Today, you're in luck because we're going to be talking about both, so stay tuned. Hey everybody, welcome back to another FUTRtech video podcast. The audio version of the podcast is now available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and most of the others. Or you can find it at futr.buzzsprout.com. Now, one of the biggest challenges with security is knowing where to spend your money and where to put in the effort to achieve the best results. The truth is, unless you know what the state of your security is, it is very hard to take effective measures to protect your organization. Today, we're talking with Safe Security CEO Saket Modi. Saket is a young and dynamic CEO who has a really refreshing take on business and security. And they have an A-list group of investors backing them, which includes former Cisco CEO John Chambers, who was a lead investor. Safe Security is in the business of measuring trust and making cyber risk an informed decision. So Saket's going to fill us in on the state of security and tell us why understanding risk is the first step in the battle to protect your business. Welcome, Saket.
Thanks for having me on the show, Chris and Sandesh. Looking forward.
Yeah. Thanks so much for coming on. So I just give me a little bit about, the founder story here. What was the problem that you saw in the market that you just like, I got to start a company to, I'm a young guy. I could be doing, going around doing crazy things, but instead I'm going to start this security company. What was the problem that you saw in the market that so compelled you?
Chris, I'm a geek and a nerd by pride. Historically, I've been a terrible student in my school days, college days. The only two subjects which I was always top in my class were computer science and mathematics. And in my final year of engineering, if you think about it, cybersecurity is not a different field than computer science. It's only getting deeper into computer science, where you're so deep, where you're able to see things which most people would miss out on. And then you can twist and bend things so that you can yourself hack it. And then you can actually go to organizations to defend if somebody else is trying to twist and bend or hack their systems. So the story there is very simple. Computer science was absolutely the first love of my life. And when that was the case, I wanted to go as deep as you can into it, to the bits and bytes, to the NAND, NOR, and XOR gates of what's really happening inside a computer. And when you know that, you're able to do a lot of things out there. And what better way to actually have a career where you're actually getting paid for what you enjoy doing the most. So the choice was pretty simple because everybody, I think, has a hacker in them. Everybody wants to know what they're not allowed to know. That's how Adam and Eve happened. We all know that, and that's what really got me to cybersecurity. So it scratched the curiosity angle, ticked it in the box. At the same time, computer science, which I absolutely wanted to get into, not just as a techie but also as an entrepreneur. I think all of those things happens together, and that's where the startup was born back from my dorm rooms. It was 8 years back.
So Saket, that's an awesome story. And, it seems like you're in the right place at the right time now, because I think we are witnessing some of the biggest security breaches we have ever seen, right? I mean, in particular, the SolarWinds breach that everybody is just, completely preoccupied with. There's been a lot of activity on that front, and malware and all, malware and ransomware and all those things have been really front and center. So can you talk to me a little bit about what you're seeing on the security front and what some of the challenges are there?
Chris, I look at cyber attacks like the iPhone. Every year you have the biggest and the most amazing, which has never been out there, right?
Right.
That's how security has been, right? Yeah. If you think about it, and I still remember starting the company in 2012, I remember Yahoo getting hacked. I remember LinkedIn getting hacked with 165 million usernames and passwords. Yeah. And the world was like, oh my God, this is something which the world has never seen. And security, now is the time. And then, Stuxnet happened. And then, there's a series of these major incidents is what leads to World Economic Forum, which just released the 2021 predictions of the largest three threats that humanity faces, and cybersecurity and cyber threats featuring as one of those three which are out there. So what I would say, Chris, is that they say that you cannot stop something whose time, an idea whose time has come. Exactly in the same way, right? Cybersecurity is now front and center for any Fortune 2000 CEO, because today, and it's really not because they like cybersecurity, they want to do cybersecurity. The only reason is that they understand that if they do not digitally transform their business, they will shut down. It's really that simple, irrespective of which industry you're in. So technology, digital, which 2 decades back was just a back office automation problem, which got you a few more points on your bottom line, has now come front and center in the way you interact with your customers or acquire your customers, and frankly, even how you do your business. So when that gets affected, your top line, bottom line, reputation, and obviously your job as a CEO is also at line. And when that happens, cybersecurity, becomes one of the top 3 worries for any executive out there, irrespective of any industry. And I still remember seeing this, and this was a Senate hearing of the financial services CEOs, and this was just in 2019, right before the pandemic. And I remember the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, and you had like the top 10 banks of the US, and all of them, when they were asked, what's your number one worry that keeps you up at night? Unanimously, the answer was cybersecurity. Because there is so much going online, and the visibility in a dynamic way, in a trustable way, in an accountable way, in a way where it's proven, is still not out there. And that is the fundamental problem which we feel cybersecurity is not only been facing, but looks like it's really snowballed into something that has gone into Fortune 50 CEOs and them worrying about it.
Yeah, I think there's several things that are kind of converging here right now, right? On the one front, we've got the pandemic, so everybody's working from home, which created this huge attack surface with everybody sort of operating remotely. But the other piece of that was that caused the businesses to look to go to sort of next gen IT and move things to the cloud and things like that. So we saw just this a lot more distributed infrastructure, which obviously creates a lot of security problems. But the other piece of it is that when you talk about the CIOs and their concerns around it, if you look at the cost of some of these, like the SolarWinds breach here, and like CISA had the recommendation, basically do what Sony did when they got breached and build a parallel infrastructure and forensically migrate everything to it, because nothing can be trusted, right? When you have these supply chain attacks, it gets really complicated. So I don't know if you could you want to speak to that a little bit.
Absolutely, Chris. So you're absolutely right. I think the big 2 themes as verticals that we all know is emerging and is already talked about is cloud and data. And when I say data, is where artificial intelligence and machine learning comes in. And the reason I call them vertical is the horizontal that cuts across both of them is security. Right? Because if you don't have security, both of them would not work out, or even worse, will work and produce the wrong output, which is not something that you want, right? Yeah. Now, a lot has been spoken on the enterprise side of cloud and data. If you just double click there and actually see the consumer side of cloud and data also, and that's also very interesting, Chris, because there's a lot which is spoken and invested and focused when it comes to enterprise cloud adoption. We all know about AWS, Azure, GCP, and there's a host of new vendors which are coming on those lines. But think about it, cloud for consumer is now really democratized, where, we are using Zoom right now, right? And there's a free of cost Zoom account that millions of people use, whether it's your Gmail account, whether it's your WhatsApp or your Snapchat or your anything that's really at a consumer level, playing with where the cloud is, and without even realizing that all of your data is going to the cloud, or which cloud, or whose cloud, and that those are all issues which are out there.
Yeah.
And if you really think about data, right? I mean, the amount of data that is collected for anybody who's just carrying a $50 smartphone also is far more than the total data that was used to send the first Apollo mission to the moon, right? And you're talking about one individual out there. So if you think about it, right, at an enterprise level, all of this is happening. But what's more scary is at an individual level, all of this has already started happening, and it's really seeped into our both professional and personal lives. That till the time we don't get trained, get equipped to use these really cutting edge technologies, which are so easily free of cost available to most audience out there, it really is creating a problem. And that's the reason why I say the horizontal there is cybersecurity, because if you don't do that at a personal level, at an enterprise level, at the government level, it is really a scary future that we're walking into.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I think is really interesting about what you guys are doing, and it's sort of your way of thinking about security, is that, when I talk about the fact that this attack surface has gotten so huge, right? That I don't even know how, as a CISO in a Fortune 500, you would even take a look at all your environment and say, here's where we're going to put our money to fix and remediate issues. And like you mentioned, very importantly, people are a big part of that security challenge, right? And the more you have people, swimming the right way, the better off you're going to be. But how, identifying that and figuring out what your risk level is and where to put your resources is a really challenging problem, right?
Yeah, and it only gets amplified, Chris, because the problem is that today the board requires the security and risk leader to sign off saying that we are doing okay, right? and the problem there is that given the scale and size of most large enterprises, the fact of the matter is you are not okay, right? How do you know that, there's another SolarWind not waiting out there, just waiting to be detected someday?
Or already in your organization. I mean, it was out there for what?
Exactly.
16 months or something like that?
Precisely, right?
Yeah.
So, and it's so scary, right? So, and that's the reason why there's this famous saying, right, which says there are only two types of companies in the world: one who know that they've been breached, and the other who don't, right? But coming back to your point, think about it, right? Think about the life of a CISO or a CRO these days. Even if they have millions of dollars of budget, you typically have anywhere between 25 to 50 cybersecurity products in your environment. Every product, even in your best of your capacity, you try to get the best on the top right of the magic quadrant and things around that. Each product sings its own song, speaks in its own language.
Yeah.
And each one of them is giving you a list of actionables. The problem is there is nobody who actually puts all of that together dynamically. You can do it manually. I know banks which have teams of like 25 full-time employees whose only job is to crunch that data which comes from various sources and produce executive dashboards, produce the right kind of, the output which can be consumed. And I don't need to tell you about the problems about individuals subjectively taking signals from various places, putting a layer of abstractions of high, medium, low, or red, amber, green, and then marrying one red, amber, green with another red, amber, green. That's not how you scientifically, mathematically, marry risks together. And that has been the missing area, Chris, that we feel that, we've been fortunate to now been spending a number of years on, that how do you aggregate, normalize in a dynamic way, not based on question and answers, and then give a single source of truth, not for your entire organization, because that can sound very overwhelming, but probably only for your crown jewels. Only for the critical business units or applications which really matter. And then you get a visibility like no other. So we feel that's a very, very complex problem that most CISOs around the world are really grappling with. Yeah. And they're really stuck in between. When the board asks, you have to sign off saying everything is okay. But if you say it's not okay, the question becomes, how much not okay? And you don't have an objective answer to that. So I actually feel that's a huge problem out there, Chris.
Yeah, I think, from my experience with, a lot of security folks in large organizations like that, is they just really don't know the answer to any of these questions, how vulnerable they are, how many issues they might have. And I think, it comes to, too much information sometimes is as bad as no information, right? And I had a good friend who's a CCO of like a Fortune 50 company. And, his strategy was like, I don't have an unlimited budget. I don't have unlimited resources. So I need to attack the problem where I can identify the biggest gaps are and try to remediate them. And for him, one of the things that he always said was that where we have our biggest issues is when people are about to leave or are leaving the company, right? Yeah. So he focused a lot of his remediation efforts around things like that, between training and offboarding people and making sure accounts are handled right and all those sorts of things, right? But that's it's like that old story about the B-52s when they came back and they were looking like where are all the bullets in the B-52, right? So we'll just armor all those places and then we'll send it back out. Well, the planes kept getting shot down because the thing was, where the bullets hit was where the plane was safe. The planes that got shot down didn't come back. So you didn't know where those bullet holes were, right? So, I mean, I think it's sort of like a self-fulfilling prophecy when you kind of, make assumptions like that, right?
I completely agree with you. And Chris, again, and remember, you're talking about a Fortune 50 company, right? That's like 0.000000001% of the total number of organizations which are out there. And when their CISO says, I have limited budget, I have limited resources, imagine what a Fortune 2000, and forget a Fortune 2000, what does Joe's Pizza Shop, who just started delivering pizzas online and is looking at, getting a intelligent POS out there and even building an app, would think. And that is the fundamental problem, because starting from the right on the top, going all the way down to Joe's Pizza Shop, you don't have a unified dynamic metric or a standard. And if you think about it, Chris, let me draw a parallel. You spoke about aircrafts, right? And one of our very large Fortune 50 customers, it's one of the world's largest manufacturing company. And I was talking to their CIO and he said, Saket, you know what I love about your product? The problem with cybersecurity that everybody keeps talking about, you talk about a lot of CISOs and say, you know what, there are too many moving parts, internal, external, people, that it's next to impossible to quantify. And he was saying that, think about it, right? They produce shampoos, for example. So he said that, look, if you buy one bottle of shampoo that my company produces from a Target or a Walmart, what is the degree of risk that you think in your mind you're taking that this shampoo bottle will have bacteria? And I said, I've never even thought about it, right? I mean, if it has your logo, it pretty much means it is safe to use, right? He gave another example. He said, okay, if you walk into an Airbus plane, right, and you're taking a flight, how many times are you scared that, the flight will not make it and things around that? I was like, well, really never, right? I mean, we take flights all the time, right? And he says, do you know this, that an Airbus 320 has more than 700,000 parts which come together to make the plane fly? And those are only internal parts. You're not taking into account the external weather and the air pressure and, like a gazillion parameters which are out there. So he said, if you think about the Industrial Revolution 1 and 2, they all went through the same phase. At one time, you could not buy a shampoo bottle with at least 1 out of 3, and then it became 1 out of 10, and then 1 out of 100, and then 1 in a million, which will have a problem. And there was a standardization which came in where it says, oh, you're not allowed to make a machine it's like security by design, right? You're not allowed to make something which will have anything less than 99.99999% accuracy, which is out there. And now that's standard. We don't even think about there's something that can go wrong. So is the case with most airplanes, right? But with cybersecurity, that has still not happened. It is still too many moving parts. It's still, hey, I don't know what my posture is, or if I know it, it's based on a one-time audit that is done by a with a list of like 200 questions, and based on a small sample set of assets that I'll take the findings from and then extrapolate the results with everything which is out there, which by no means is accurate. So that is the fundamental thing, Chris, that we're trying to solve, and that's something which we feel is a huge challenge in the industry out there right now.
Well, another thing that comes up too, and I think is a really important point, is there's just not enough people to do this, and when you make it a very manual process that requires very high skill people, there's just not enough to go around, and especially in different markets. Having something that can kind of shortcut some of that process and make that easier and standardized, I can see a tremendous amount of value in that.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. If you think about it, right, in general, you typically need a double PhD on a particular product to be able to operate that. And if a company has 300,000 employees, even after having 300,000 employees, there's a high chance when it procures a very niche cutting edge product, there will be not more than 3 employees who know how to use their damn product.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm saying that, and that's pretty standard, right? I mean, most products don't not perform because they didn't have the capability, but they were not configured in the right way, they were not installed in the right way, and you don't use it to the optimal value. And there was some other sales guy of a different OEM which just came in, and something else get acquired, etc., etc. To your point about standardizing, now let's take healthcare as an example. Today, you don't have to be a doctor to read a blood test report. Mm-hmm. You can just order a report, we'll take your blood sample, and the report will come to you. And you can literally see the count, hemoglobin count, and then you have a number and you have a range. Now, as long as the number falls in the range, you're all good, right? And if the number is not in the range, is when go and then look at a physician, or you see there might be some issue. That's democratizing, that's standardizing, saying, hey, you know what? There's certain standards where you don't need a super, MD, or even a doctor as a physician who will come in and guide you. That's still not there in cybersecurity. Think about it, right? I mean, unfortunately, today you have approximately 2 billion people using the smartphone. Although there are so many people using the smartphone, Chris, the number of people who even remotely understand how a smartphone gets hacked. I get this all the time. You know what, Saket? I carry an Apple smartphone with a fingerprint recognition. There is nobody in the world which can hack me because my fingerprint is just with me. And I'm like, I don't even know where to start, right? And that's the problem, right? It's just not being standardized, right? And that's a requirement in the industry out there right now, Chris.
Well, I'll tell you, from building high security facilities in my previous life, fingerprints are not always unique, nor because part of the challenge is when you build a device that has to deal with any number range of people. Sure. Some people have deeper grooves and some people have shallower grooves, right? Yeah. So the level of sensitivity that you add to these products, declines as you open it up to more and more people, right? And when you do that, then you can get a lot of different things. Yeah. So I mean that's an interesting point. So tell me a little bit about like what you're talking about is measuring trust in your organization, right? So what does it mean to measure trust? How are you measuring trust, and what goes into that?
So Chris, I think if we break that question down into a couple of places, right? The first part is that when you look at technology, which is becoming an enabler to your business, you want to have a certain degree of trust. So for a second, let's forget technology. Let's talk about people, right? Because the first thing you do is you get the right people who make a business, right? Mm-hmm. Now, what is the fundamental thing that you want when you're building the team? You want a group of people that you can trust. Now, how do you measure trust for people? You get people with the right kind of track record.
Yeah.
Either through references, through the right partners, through the right channels. And then once they come in with the right track record, trustability, and whether you like them, culture fit, et cetera, then you know that the foundation on which you can build a business is relatively strong. Now, the same analogy can be given to technology, where we say, hey, you need technology to build the business. The problem is the track record of technology or the trustability of the technology is something which has never been measured. Think about it. The highest attacked and exploited operating system on the planet is the Windows operating system. Mm-hmm. And the highest installed operating system is also the Windows operating system, right? To think about it, it's almost like saying that the person who has the highest number of charges, you would still be hiring the highest number of people from there, right?
Right.
And things around that, right? That doesn't happen with technology, right? It's traditionally never been happening because there are so many different variables, and more importantly, there's different degree of understanding of how do you use the technology, and what are the attributes that goes around measuring trust. So first of all, that's how we look at it. Now, when you talk about measurement, right? You always talk about where you are today and then where do you want to go tomorrow. That's the whole premise of measurement, right? So it's all about saying that in a dejargonized way. That's the whole meaning of measurement, where you don't need, it's not sine square plus cos square equal to 1. It's like very simple English saying on a scale of 0 to 5, what is the breach likelihood of my organization, right? Mm-hmm. And that is what every board wants to know. Every CEO wants to know. Don't tell me how many firewalls are installed in my environment or how many people clicked on a phishing link or we have patched 99.987% of systems in my environment. None of that is important. When I say important, of course, they're important because they are the means to get to the end answer, which is what is the likelihood that I will be breached in the next 12 months? And mind you, I say 12 months because as geeks and nerds, we know if you take infinite time, the probability is always 1. You will definitely be breached, right? So you want in a finite amount of time, saying in 12 months, what is the probability that you will be breached? Simple question that everybody wants to know. And if you want to take it one step further, where you go from cyber risk to operational risk, you say, what does that likelihood of breach translate into the dollar value potential impact that can happen on the business if a breach happens, if there is an impact on our confidentiality, integrity, and availability? That is simply the output of what I call as measuring trust. Now, on the other side, the input, and it's really not as complex as people think it is. We have simply divided that into something as fundamental as people, process, and technology. If you think about it, that's what really matters for your own organization. There is a fourth vector called third parties, the supply chain, which is like an extremely important aspect which is out there. And when you put all of that together, you can come out with the overall breach probability, because any breach which happens, Chris, you know this, it has to have a vector which touches something on the people side, something that went wrong on the technology side. There were some policies not being followed, and either it happens in your core network, your own cloud, or in your supply chain, which you were connected to. So at a high level, those are the block diagrams, or blocks that make the diagram of what your overall enterprise attack surface looks like. And then you keep on, decomposing it into individual units. People will be employees and the kind of culture that you've got around that. Policies and processes will all be about the governance and the intent of security and defining that, and the effectiveness of, saying how close are we with the intent where we want to be. Technology is, again, straightforward, right? It's on cloud, which is IaaS, PaaS, or SaaS, or the on-prem assets that you've got. You put all of that together again, and then you marry it and bubble it together, not only at the organization level, but individual business unit level, individual application level. So that is how we look at measuring trust on technology, Chris, from an enterprise perspective.
So, I love the fact that you talk about supply chain, because obviously this the big SolarWinds breach is a supply chain breach. And I think when you look at who got breached with the supply chain breach, there's going to be more supply chain breaches down the road, because some of the key holders got popped, and so I think we're going to see more to this as it unfolds. But I also like the fact that you talk about people and process, because that's an aspect of it that is so critical, but gets overlooked a lot when evaluating security, and integrating that into your security score, I think is a really key factor, right? I just see that as a missing piece in a lot of people's evaluation typically.
Not only in the evaluation, Chris, it's a missing factor in most people's budgets also.
Yeah.
And I'll explain you this, right? Look at the irony. 90% of cyber attacks which happen out there have a people element or a human element in it, right? You typically have a phishing, Stuxnet happen because of people picking up pen drives from their, their garage and then plugging it into their systems, right? So 90% of the times you have a people element involved in hacks. While if you look at almost any company's cybersecurity budget, I am still to come across one company which allocates more than 10% of their budget on people.
Yeah.
And the funny thing there, the problem that 10% also, it's used for things like, we will do training courses that you have to sit down once in a year or once in 6 months and watch a video and click on a couple of things. And you know what it's called? It's called computer-based training. I mean, the name itself is like, what
an afterthought.
Yeah, it's like come on, in the age of Netflix, really? Computer-based training, right? Are we serious? And that coupled with a few phishing campaigns, and by no means am I saying phishing is not important. Of course it is, but that's about it, right? I mean, that's in most companies. Again, of course, there are exceptions out there, but in most companies that you'll do some trainings, you'll do some phishing campaigns, and in general, that pauses there, saying, okay, that's all we need to do for people, and it really doesn't go beyond. The thing that I always feel surprised about. Think about it, Chris. Today, the content you get on your Instagram or Facebook feed, the ads that you get on Google, right? I mean, all of that is hyper personalized.
Yeah.
Based on the clicks you've done, the search history, based on your coordinates, based on a gazillion factors, and we know that by now, right? But think about the training given to an organization with 100,000 employees. It's called a vanilla training, which is like, hey, these are the 20 courses that everybody needs to do. And once they do it, I can say in my NIST CSF compliance that I'm doing people training, awareness training, and that's about it. I mean, in an era of hyper personalization per individual, why can we not hyper personalize the security requirement depending on the person's profession, their responsibility, their state of the mind, the apps that they browse, the URLs that they go to? All of that can be used to attribute and give what is your security credit score that you've got. And based on that, you're given access to the right kind of files or allowed to do transactions on your phone only if you clear a particular threshold of saying, are you security cleared or not for a particular level? So that's what we feel is a big problem in the industry that's generally overlooked. And we feel that, one of the big growth areas that's going to happen in the near future would be on the people side of things, Chris.
Yeah, no, I totally see that. And I think, back in my days on the other side of the business, taking a risk-based approach to security is really critical. And I found that most organizations, are not really taking an informed risk-based approach to their security. And I like the fact that you can kind of come in and give these risk factors, because I think, people have preconceived notions about where their vulnerabilities are and what their risk factors are, but that's not evidence-based often. And I like the fact that, this is applying an evidence-based approach to what your risk levels are, right?
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. You have evidences from an internal perspective, and then you need threat intelligence from the external perspective. Because remember, based on the geography, industry, and size, there will be different kinds of threat actors which will have different degrees of intent and motivation of intruding into you. And if you marry internal gaps with external threat intelligence, and you put that together, that is what we call as breach likelihood. And when you marry breach likelihood with potential consequences or impact, Using something called Monte Carlo simulation is where you come out with the dollar value risk that an organization is sitting on. So the score we give, we don't call the score as a risk score. It's a function of the risk. It is not the risk. Risk for us only has one unit, dollar value. You know why? That's the only unit that 7 billion people on this planet understand. Every other metric is subjective. It has a bias that you carry. But dollar values, you have some standardization. So that's how we look at, holistic risk postures, Chris.
So I want to. I think it's very interesting. Some of the approaches you're taking to solve the people problem, and I would be remiss not to mention your sort of freemium app, iOS app. I don't know if it's on Android too. I would assume it probably is or will be. SafeMe, right? Which sort of evaluates your personal risk level based on a personalized profile of the individual using it, right? And I think the thing that's cool about that is that not only do you identify risk within an environment, but you give tools to remediate it. And by tools, I don't mean necessarily another piece of hardware you got to put on your network, but actually training and instruction and best practices that you can teach the individuals who are showing signs of risk, right? If you're going to talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. If you know historically, Chris, when we started building the product, like most companies, our laser focus was technology. It was not people. We used to look at people, but based on 20 questions and answers that you would give us.
Yeah.
The way we give safe scores or breach likelihood score to every IP address in your network, every Amazon resource number or Azure resource ID, your SFDC or your MuleSoft or your Snowflake or any SaaS application that you've got. We took the exact same context and the concept. And most of our customers, when they were saying, hey, you know what, we need more depth on people. We said, look, we've been able to devise a way where at a granular level, we're all engineers here, so we like breaking things down. So at a granular level, at the leaf node level, we are getting scores for every IP address in the technology side. Remember, people, process, and technology. So that was technology. We said, why can we not apply the same principle to people where we give dynamic scores to every employee of an organization? And in order to give a score, and this has to be a breach likelihood score of an employee, we needed something which was personalized to an employee. So Chris, today, if you have a UEBA solution, which is linked to an SIEM, every UEBA solution has a score for every employee of your organization. But you know the problem of that UEBA score? The only people who see it are the 20 people who sit in the SOC out of 200,000 employees which are there within your organization or whatever that number is. We said, what is the one common smart thing that every employee of our target audience as enterprises will have in their hands? And the answer was simple. It was smartphones. So we said, number one, it has to be a mobile first approach, not based on just web and, just going in an old school way. So we said it has to be a web app. It has to be a mobile application, a mobile first. It does have a web component. If somebody wants to log in, that's fine. But the primary interface has to be mobile. When we started building that, Chris, a few years back, a lot of people came to us because the mobile app, I wanted to show the risk score to an individual there itself. At the same time, give them stuff that they have to learn, whether their information is exposed on the social media of the deep web, dark web. I want to tell them how secure is their mobile phones with single sign-on, tell, how secure is their other social media accounts, et cetera, et cetera. And while coming to that list, which is out there, one of my engineers came to me and said, you know what, Saket, we are creating these amazing 3-minute nano courses, like how to secure Amazon, how do you secure your, mobile wallet, how do you secure your PayPal application, et cetera, et cetera. And he said, you know what, I would love my grandmother to actually use this because she's using all of these applications every day and she's never, ever got a training of how do you secure this. There was another person, my chief architect, which came and said, you know what? My daughter is starting to use WhatsApp and Snapchat. Why don't we create 3-minute videos the way we are creating it for enterprise app, consumer apps, which says, how to use Snapchat in a secured way? Mm-hmm. And make that out for consumers. So we took the mobile first route. We built a mobile app and we said, again, this is a truly born in the cloud product. So, the number of servers that we spin up to run SafeMe is 0. And using, literally Cognito, which is Amazon AWS's, native authentication mechanism, we were able to simply make certain set of rules where when Chris logs in with his professional email ID and his organization is registered, you will get the app's experience as the enterprise experience. So you will see videos and courses which your CISO wants you to see as campaigns. You'll be able to add 5 emails instead of 1. You'll be able to see more controls and all of those things. But we said, why not create a completely free of cost version for people out there and give it out with 0 permissions. Remember, my app is a 0 permission app. If I'm a security app and I am taking permissions to see your pictures and location, that would be wrong. 0 permissions, free of cost, no ads. The intent is not to make money from consumers. We're very, very clear on that. So we said, why don't we produce it to keep it on the App Store? Chris, as you know, we launched this around 6 weeks back. And we've seen an overwhelming response. We got already like 50,000 downloads without any advertising. This is purely organic, and it's just been overwhelming. So that is the story around SafeMe and how that came out. And the beauty there is it's not like an independent awareness app or things around that. It rolls up. So to a large organ, we're right now starting deployment for an organization with 200,000 employees. And all that their CISO and HR has to do is just go ahead and say, hey, download this app and sign in using your Active Directory password or credentials, which are out there. And it's really that simple. And the moment you're in, the CISO gets one dashboard, which are the top 10 riskiest users in which department, which are the top. And then, you can do a lot, which is out there. In the near future, we're integrating with the UEBA and in the CASB with DLP, with EDR. All of those are metadata about an individual. We put all of that together and then give a score of, what is the probability of breach that a person is sitting on. And that's where we are.
Yeah, I think that's awesome because I think, we talk about spending your money wisely, right? I mean, I think what happens is a lot of organizations, they just give this kind of crappy blanket training because they have to check a box, but it doesn't really do any good for their organization. But now if you have sort of a risk score for an individual, you can target more elaborate, education at them and spend your money wisely without having to sort of do it for everybody and kind of get a much better result. So tell me a little bit about, what would you say are like sort of your sweet spots, your key use cases, the kind of key differentiators that, this is where this really shines.
Number 1 is digital business risk quantification, Chris. That is the number 1 use case. The mission statement of my company is by 2025, we want to become the global de facto industry standard to measure and mitigate cyber risks. So we are very clear that that's our number 1 use case on why we want to be out there. But think of us like Amazon, right? Amazon started as an aggregator between sellers and buyers. But because it got a lot of sellers and buyers, it had the intelligence of producing a few products in some categories, which it knew there was a very high demand, but the supply was very, very limited. Exactly in the same way, we saw that the cloud scoring or the cloud security posture management is a huge demand. So today I give scores to every Amazon resource number, every S3 bucket, EC2 instance, every I am user, I am role, I am policy, everything gets a real-time breach likelihood score. So my second largest use case why it's being used is really cloud security posture management. And remember, I'm not just cloud, I'm hybrid because I give scores to your on-prem servers, laptops, databases, all of those guys. I give scores to your mobile phones and I give scores to every not only IS and PAS, but I give scores to your SFDC, MuleSoft, Snowflake, and the popular SaaS applications which are out there. So it truly becomes a holistic picture. So again, going back to my first use case, but the second use case is really about monitoring your hybrid cloud environment specifically. The third piece would be that all of this can be done in the third-party environment from the inside out. So Chris, we say that there are 3 waves of third-party risk management. The first was the questionnaire-based assessment. It's been there for ages. When you onboard a third party, you give a questionnaire, they fill in, and they promise you that they will not go against what they are signing up, as terms and condition, right? That was the first wave. The second wave were the SRS tools like BitSight Security Scorecard, UpGuard. A lot of them have a lot of value from the outside only. So it's limited value that you're able to see for your third parties because they're only scanning the primary domains and the associated and the subdomains of that. And you and I know this for any large enterprise, 99.9% of their infrastructure is internal. It is not external. Even if it is, it needs an authentication to get inside, which of course they would not get into. So that was the second wave. The third wave is where we come in, Chris, where we actually provide a score for every contractor, where every laptop which connects to your network will not be allowed to connect till the score of the laptop is not 4 or above. We provide a way where if you have a call center based out of India and you are worried about their employees not abiding by security policies that you define, you mandate that their mobile phones need to have a zero permission app. Until the time the score of the employee is not a particular number, they will not be allowed to talk to your customers or even enter the premise of where things are. So that's like the third-party risk management use case, extremely unique because there are, to our knowledge, no companies on the planet which actually give you an inside-out risk posture of the laptops, of the employees, and even the cloud solutions that the third party is using. And you can do all of this with zero deployment at the third party premise because the third party generally will have a problem if you say, hey, give me a server, I'll deploy something, blah, blah, blah. No deployment, and still you get an inside-out security risk posture. So these would be my top 3 of what we are doing. And then, of course, comes insider threat where you talk about people. And then, of course, comes vulnerability management and configuration drift assessment. So those would be my top 5 risks.
Yeah, and I think it's cool, too, that you're really clearly targeting people who are, everybody from the consumer to the large enterprise, it sounds like, too, which is really cool.
Saket, from my perspective, and Chris and I speak with a lot of startups, you have many of the elements that we look for. You got great people, you got a great idea, you got a great engineering team. You're putting all those parts and pieces together. But you being a first-time young entrepreneur here, what are your thoughts and what's your strategy to build a great company? Not just the technology and the people in it, but what's the plan to make sure that you can build a company that lasts for decades on decades from here?
So, Sandesh, the point that I'm laser focused on is how do we solve a problem which genuinely exists in the market? The moment you can find the right plug, the right product market fit, how do you find it is where culture, people, technology come in, and I'm going to come to that. But the moment you find the right plug, the byproduct is you're there for many, many decades until something else comes up, right? So for me, to be there for a long time, I don't worry about the long time part. I worry about how do we relentlessly listen to our customers. We have 7 core values in the company, in our culture deck. The number 1 value is we are customer first. I think there was only one Steve Jobs out there who just knew what his customers wanted. I mean, we mere mortals are not Steve Jobs. And when that is the case, we go ahead and the next best option is shut up and listen to your customers and keep listening to them till the time you have a product which they can say, you know what, this is Yahoo. This is exactly what I'm looking for. And when you can do that to 1, 2, 3 large enterprises, suddenly there's a swamp of enterprises which has the almost same problem out there, and then you can solve that. So for me, to look at a company for a long term, I'm more focused on how do you solve the problem in the right way. The byproduct is the legacy and the decades of being there. Now, how do you solve the problem is where you were referring to. That is where the two things that I look at, Sandesh, and that's why I like saying that my job in my organization is probably one of the easiest. And I'll explain you why I say that. On one side, I've got some of the most incredible investors and advisors that a first-time entrepreneur can ever get. Mm-hmm. So if I just go back to our starting point, Chris, my strength areas, I'm a deep technical, geek nerd. I'm high on energy. I can jump around all the time. I can keep jumping between continents every 3 days. At the same time, being a first-time founder, what I don't have is the right playbooks to create, the right product market fit with the product, the right messaging, the right culture. How do you hire the right people? How do you retain the right people? How do you get the right go-to-market strategy? How do you get the channels on board? How do you, expand, land and expand, all of those things? To do that, what I have done on one side, I've surrounded myself with the best on the planet. So if I have a question about how do I make my platform more scalable, my investor is the CTO of PayPal, who's arguably made one of the most, scaled up software on the planet, who helps me and my team say, hey, this is what you need to think while you think of scaling up. When I want to go ahead and ask questions around HR, one of the managing directors of Google is an angel investor who talks to me about the culture of Google and how it has really, over decades, bred the right kind of innovation and the right kind of culture of putting things together. Similarly, I've got these categories. On top of that list, if I want to learn how to be a good CEO, a technical CEO who can run a technology company, I've got on that top of that list John Chambers, who I don't need to tell you, has arguably built one of the largest technology companies on the planet. So, and these people are not somebody who I would text and then I would get a reply after 2 weeks. John, for an example, spends an hour with me on a weekly basis for the last 2 years. What I'm also saying there is that, a lot of smart things that I might be speaking, it's really them speaking. I just listen to them and then I talk in with smart anchors like yourself, and then it makes me look good. But that's on one side, that I've surrounded myself with some of the best on the planet to really advise me, consult me, and guide me with where we are going. On the other side is where my 200-member team comes into the picture, Sandesh. My rule has been very, very simple. In my organization, I only want to be hiring people who are smarter than me in doing what they are doing. What that simply means is that, and that's a very simple benchmark, not a very high benchmark now, because I have way too smarter people than me in what they're doing. I look at it like a football game, right? Somebody is in the front, somebody is defending, and both of us need to do our jobs to be able to go and win the cup. And for especially people who report to me, the simple rule is, I only get people who report to me who I would not mind reporting to. So if you think about it, right, in my best capacity, given the limited resources, we are a Series A funded company, I would want to get the absolute best out there who I can learn from. So think about it. And that's why I said my job becomes easy. On one side, I have the best, mentoring me. And on the other side, I have the best possible that I could get with the limited resources who can execute. So when I have on both the sides the best, all I have to do is being a mediator between the two, and a lot of good things happen. So yeah, that's where we are, Sandesh. I don't know if that answered your question.
Oh, it absolutely did, and it inspires me. I think I speak for Chris as well. When we speak with you, I love it. Your enthusiasm and your just passion for it. So my last question for you would be, what makes Saket tick? Like you are so full of energy. You're so young still. You have so much in front of you. Like where does that all come from? Where does that fire come from?
You need the answer of what makes you tick when there are moments when you're not ticked. So I'll explain that, Sadesh. Think of it like this, right? If you're on a drug where the problem of that drug is it doesn't come down for years and for decades. That's what is for me when you talk about running this startup, right? It's almost like being high on my startup, high on life. And when you're doing that, right, it's like it's like sleeping is a waste of time, right? It's like why do you want to go ahead and do anything else when it is so much incredible fun to be talking to the biggest brands on the planet, explaining them what you think you know about their environment and can show them about their environment, what they over the decades have probably not seen or not had the time or resources to see. On the other side, talking to and building this culture and the team which is out there, which can complement and really start from zero and try to create an impact in a world which is frankly struggling with a problem like ours. So when you look at all of those things and put it together, Sandesh, you don't need something that ticks you. You're like ticked all the time. In fact, the other way around. I feel if you need external stimulus to tick you, the problem with that is that it'll always be temporary, and it will not be long lasting. And that means, sometimes you'll be high and sometimes you'll really go to very low, and that will become a challenge. So I don't know if that answered your question directly, but that's how I look at it. And that's why I'm jumping all the time. You can tell by now.
And I love that answer. And I'll tell you why, especially in the middle of COVID and everything else. I think everyone has been asking themselves, what's my purpose in life? And I think there's a lot of people that are looking at their careers and saying, is this really what I want to do? Is this what life is supposed to be like? And for Chris and I, we're like you, we love technology. We love this, that's why we work late nights and early mornings and weekends, and my kids and my wife constantly lets me know that I'm distracted, which I need to work on, right? But it's that is what I think, you have to have the passion for the right reasons, and you have that. And so that was very eloquent. Love it. But yeah, Chris, thanks for giving me the chance.
Yeah, no, Saket, I think you're really, Sandesh and I both are really intrigued by what you're going to do with your company, because it's not often we find sort of interesting, young, dynamic, competent leaders like yourself, and so it's always exciting and fun to watch. So I really appreciate you coming on and filling us in on everything. It's been great to hear your story.
I thank you, Chris and Sandesh. I feel a young person can have a lot of energy, but it gets directed in the right direction with mentors. Whether it's John, I've learned from you guys. I've watched almost most of your podcast while preparing for this one. So it was extremely, it was extremely intellectually stimulating also with everything that you bring out there. So thank you so much for an opportunity. I'm truly honored. And obviously, I'll keep you posted, even if you don't want it, about what's going on with us. So that's where we are.
Yeah, I definitely want it. And I got to say, you're probably the first person to watch all the videos.
I said almost.
Almost. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Well, awesome, man. Thank you so much for being on. Really appreciate it. And, good luck with everything.
Thank you so much for having me here. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Sandesh.
Thanks for watching. If you like what you saw, please click on that like button, hit that subscribe button, because that helps the channel a tremendous amount. And if you want to get notified when I post new content, click on that bell icon and you will get notified. And I will see you in the next video.